How's it going, everyone, and welcome back to the House of Horror podcast. You've heard of the 6 degrees of separation, right? It's the idea that everyone in the world is 6 or fewer steps away from each other so that a chain of a friend of a friend of a friend statements can be made to connect any 2 people to each other. Well, today, we're only going to have 3 degrees of separation. First starts with you and me. If you're listening to this, I assume you know who I am, but if not, hi, I'm Buddy Candela. Nice to meet you. The next link in the chain is my guest today, Mike, who just so happened to attend the same high school as Jeffrey Dahmer. So right now, you're only 3 degrees of separation away from one of the most notorious serial killers the world has ever seen. Or you would be 3 degrees of separation away if Jeff was still alive today. Everyone knows about the unforgivable crimes that Jeff committed, but today, we aren't going to be talking about Jeffrey Dahmer the murderer, or Jeffrey Dahmer the cannibal, or Jeffrey Dahmer the psychopath. Today, we're going to be talking about Jeffrey Dahmer the boy, Jeffrey Dahmer the class clown, Jeffrey Dahmer the friend. As I said, today my guest on the show is my friend Mike, who was a former friend and classmate of Jeff Dahmer back when they were both in high school. This time in their life was recently adapted into the critically acclaimed film My Friend Dahmer, starring Ross Lynch. We're going to be talking about their time together back at Revere High School, how he reacted when he found out that many years down the road his former friend had committed these crimes, and what it's like having a film based around his high school experience. As I mentioned later on in the podcast, everyone is friends with that one weird kid in high school, but in Mike's case, that kid just so happened to grow up to be a serial killer. Mike never knew Jeff the killer. Mike only knew Jeff the weird kid in class, and hadn't seen or spoken to him since their senior year. That's where their friendship, just like the film My Friend Dahmer, ends. If you haven't yet, I do at some point suggest that you check out the film, as well as the graphic novel by Derf Backderf from which the film was adapted. Besides Jeffrey Dahmer, Mike and I talk about his various trips across the country and abroad, what it's like teaching college students, and his experience meeting Kolchak the Night Stalker himself, Darren McGavin, on the set of A Christmas Story. If you haven't already, please make sure you give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel. Also, if you share this video with a friend, it would be greatly appreciated. Without further ado, enjoy Mike and I's conversation about Jeffrey Dahmer. Well, I'm ready whenever you are. Is there anything that we should not talk about?
Well, I'll let you know if there is. With Jeff Dahmer, there's a lot of things that we probably shouldn't talk about, but I can't think of any. When you're talking about a serial killer, there's no boundaries, I guess. I can't think of anything.
Okay, very cool. I guess before we dive into Jeff Dahmer, I saw on Facebook recently you actually just sort of did a road trip that was like 20 hours long. What can you tell me about that? What was that experience like?
Oh, well, I do that every summer. I drive out to Oregon every summer. So is that the road trip you're talking about?
Yeah, I saw you posted an image on Facebook that was like your road trip. It was like the Google Maps or whatever that was like 20 hours long or something.
Yeah, I have a little place on the West Coast in Oregon on the ocean, and I go out there every summer because I just can't live in Indiana all year long. And so I drive out there every summer, and I've gotten used to it. I look forward to it. It's a long trip, but once you're in the car and you're going and you get across the Midwest and you get into the Rocky Mountains, and then you're almost there, and it's really cool. And I got a little cabin out there, and I take my cats with me, and I don't know if they like the trip too much, but they like it once we get there. And I spent a couple months, and then I head back. But it's coming back is hell. The drive back to Indiana is absolute hell. But going out there every summer, I look forward to it.
Do you make any stops along the way when you're on the way there or on the way back, or you just kind of go straight through? Yeah, where do you go?
I couldn't drive straight through. I make 2 stops. I do as much as I can. I do about 780 miles a day. So I make my first stop in western Nebraska and spend the night at Motel 6 because I can always sneak my cats in there. And then the second night I make it to Idaho to Twin Falls, and I spend a night in Idaho. And then the third day I make it to the coast of Oregon by late afternoon, and it's pretty amazing that you can do that. But no, I got to break it up. It's just too long a drive to do anymore without spending a couple nights of trying to sleep.
Yeah, it sounds pretty cool. I've never been on a road trip for that long before. So it sounds pretty fun.
You can't understand the United States until you do that kind of trip. You got to drive across this country and see what it's like. it really opens your eyes up. The first time I did it was about 15 years ago, 18 years ago, and man, it tells you a lot about how big this country is and how different it is, and to drive across the Dakotas and Nebraska and Wyoming and Montana and all that, it's just really amazing to do.
Yeah. I guess while we're on the topic of traveling, you and your class actually go to South Africa all the time. Why don't you tell the viewers about what you guys do down there? Because I think that's really, really interesting.
Well, I'm a professor of geography, and professors of geography need to go places. I think a lot of the learning is done outside of the classroom. And South Africa is just such a magical place. I mean, you have Cape Town, which is one of the most amazing cities, and we spend several days going up to Table Mountain, going down to the Cape of Good Hope, going to the botanical gardens, seeing the city sights, eating some great seafood, learning the history and the culture, and going out to wineries around the city and going out to see, everything that made Cape Town just one of those great world cities. And then we go to Johannesburg and spend some time there and see the Apartheid Museum and Nelson Mandela's home in Soweto. We actually went up to the country of Botswana for a few days this year, and then over to one of the premier national parks in the world, Kruger National Park, and that's a lot of fun because that's where all the big animals are, and that's what I think all Americans want to see if they go to Africa. They want to see the wildlife, and Kruger is just an amazing national park with elephants and lions, and everything is there, and it's so nice to get away from all the noise of the cities and just be out there. So it's something we do, and we learn the geography. We learn the geography of Southern Africa, and we learn the culture, and we learn as much as we can in a couple weeks. It's an awful flight.
Yeah.
You think the drive to Oregon is long, the flight to South Africa is longer. You're on a plane for 24 hours. It's just hell. It's just really hell to get there.
Yeah. How many years have you been doing that?
Oh, the South Africa one, only a couple years, but I've done programs to Kenya a few times, to East Africa, and some other parts of the world. I've done many to Europe with students all over Europe, and even Japan one time. But Africa is definitely my favorite place, and this next summer, I'm trying to put together a group of students to go to Kenya. So we'll be in Kenya hopefully in June. That's the plan right now.
Very, very cool. So I guess we'll just sort of dive in to our main subject today, which is, well, basically, I'll just let you introduce yourself. So tell the viewers who you are and why they should care about listening to this podcast, I guess.
Well, that's a good question. Why should they care? But anyways, my name's Mike Kukral, and I'm one of those persons who went to school with a serial killer named Jeffrey Dahmer. And later in life, after college days, I became a geography professor, which is not a common profession, but it's what I do. I enjoy music quite a bit. I play the piano and trombone and like to travel, and I love animals and all kinds of stuff. Different than Jeff Dahmer did, though. But
Yeah.
it's one of those experiences in life that you just can't really avoid. The subject of Jeff Dahmer at Revere High School comes up all the time, I think, in our high school days. So That's who I am.
Yeah, I think it's, I listened to a podcast recently with the original bassist from Metallica, who was, like, in their band in their garage stage, like, when they were in high school and, like, just graduated. And he has, like, sort of this philosophy that's, like, everyone's in a band when they're in high school, but his band just happened to grow up to be Metallica. And I think sort of in your case, like, everyone when they're in high school, they're sort of friends with, like, this weird kid, but it just so happens in your case that weird kid sort of grew up to be Jeffrey Dahmer.
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it. Everybody has some strange people in high school, and some more strange than others, and some weird kids, and some people you always wonder what's going to happen to them. But yeah, we had no clue that Jeff Dahmer would grow up to be who he was. And, I tell my students that now as a teacher. I always tell them, I say, hey, look at the person sitting next to you in class. Someday you may read the paper and find out they're a serial killer.
Yeah.
And of course, I get a lot of laughs for that, but that's about what happened to us.
Yeah. So I guess let's just kind of journey back. Did you grow up in Akron and Bath, or did you move there later, or did you live there throughout your whole childhood?
My family's been in that area for several generations, right in Bath Township, right where the Dahmers lived. My grandparents had a farm about 2 miles away from Jeff Dahmer's house, and I was born there in Richfield and lived there all my life. Yep.
Very cool. So, when did you first meet Jeff Dahmer?
I was thinking about that. Yeah, Jeff Dahmer, we all got thrown into the same junior high school together, and that's when I first met him. So it was in 7th grade when I met Jeff the first time, because he went to Bath Elementary. I went to Hillcrest Elementary, but we all got thrown into school together in 7th grade. So I guess we were about, 13 years old, something like that, when I met Jeff.
Did you have any first impressions of him, or was he just like another kid in the class at that point? Because I know, at least in the book and in the way the movie describes it, you guys weren't really friends until high school. But do you remember what your first impressions of him was, even back then?
He was sort of a quiet kid in like 7th, 8th grade. I mean, he was just one of the other kids, and he was sort of quiet. He read books a lot in the library, had his face always in a book, and that was about it. I don't have any real strong impressions from like 7th or 8th grade of Jeff Dahmer. He was sort of funny even then, though. He sort of had a quirky attitude, I know. And he was in the band. He played trumpet in the band, and I played trombone, and I knew him that way a little bit. But yeah, he was not so different from anybody else. He was just one of the other kids all thrown together into junior high school, when we're trying to figure out who we all are about that age.
Was he a pretty good musician in band?
That's a good question. I think he was average. I'm going to say, my expert opinion there on junior high school band, I'd say Jeff Dahmer was pretty average. He was nothing that stood out, nothing special, and he wasn't one of the real horrible musicians. I'd say he was about average. That's about right.
Because I know you're a virtuoso, so I trust your opinion on his musical prowess.
Oh, I don't know about that. You should talk to Joe Henry. He used to sit next to him. Joe Henry is a professional country western musician now, and he has a web page and all kinds of stuff. And Joe used to sit right next to Jeff Dahmer in band. So
really?
That's something to talk to. No one's ever contacted him about Jeffrey Dahmer, but somebody should.
Yeah, I know you're one of the more, because I've seen some Dahmer documentaries that you're in, and you're one of the more vocal people from your class. Is that about right?
Well, that's what I do for a living. As a professor, I talk for a living mostly, and talk to students and talk to classes. So I don't mind doing it. I don't see any reason why we shouldn't learn some more about people whose life paths go a very different, a very wrong way, and I think maybe it helps us to understand kids who are different and potentially maybe, have some serious problems later in life. So I don't think there's anything bad or wrong or evil about talking about Jeff Dahmer. It all helps to understand.
Yeah. So I guess take me to your first real memories of Jeff. When did you guys first start becoming friends? What was high school like and all that?
Oh, yeah, I'd say it was probably about, even 8th grade. I remember Jeff Dahmer sometimes sitting at the table with him in the library, in study hall and stuff like that, and not talking to him too much. Like I said, he was sort of a quiet kid. But 9th grade, I think we're all thrown into gym class together, and I remember Dahmer in gym class, and he was a little bit different, goofy in a way, and a little funny. And I think it was about this time when he started acting up some of his spasms, fake spasms, and things to get some kind of attention. And that's when I started to see him know him a little better. And about, I'd say 9th, 10th grade, about that time. And we realized he was a funny kid, and maybe we should get to know him a little bit better for his sense of humor and things he would do to crack everybody up. We didn't think anything negative about him. We didn't think anything bad about him. But that's about the time we got to know Jeff Dahmer better. It was, those couple years, and I think a lot of it was gone by our senior year, our friendship, if you call it that, with Jeff Dahmer.
Yeah. So you mentioned gym class. Was he picked last?
No, he wasn't picked. Dahmer was a strong guy. He started lifting weights and stuff. His dad bought him a weight set, and he took that up and he lifted weights. And he had a big frame to him, Jeff Dahmer. He was good, 6', 6'1" maybe, and broad-shouldered guy. And he played tennis. He was fairly athletic in that sense, at least playing tennis. But he just never pushed it. He never went that direction that he could have with athletics. But no, I don't think he was picked last. But he wasn't in. He probably wasn't in the top half either. Just because people didn't know him. Just because he was sort of that quiet kid, you weren't sure of his ability. So he wasn't in the top half even. But he wasn't at the bottom either. I know the guys at the bottom. They were the ones. You wondered how they could even manage to walk down the hall without falling over some of those guys. But yeah, that was Jeff Dahmer in gym class.
So yeah, you mentioned you guys became friends about ninth grade. I guess let's just sort of dive in to, do you have any stories, vivid memories? I know in the book it goes into a lot of detail of some stuff, but there were any things that you wanted to sort of share?
That's an interesting question. I don't think any of my gang of friends were real close with Jeff Dahmer. We all sort of hung around together, and Jeff Dahmer was sort of on the edge of my gang of friends. We laughed with him at the stuff he did, I'd say, more than at him. But he intrigued us with his bizarre behavior. Getting more and more bizarre as we got a little older. But some things that he did, I don't know. I remember him running down the hall yelling hurricane drill," things, just goofy stuff like that. And I was asked, actually, I was asked by Ross Lynch, what's the strangest thing that Jeff Dahmer ever did with me? And I told him, I said, well, in hindsight, in retrospective, one time Jeff Dahmer, just walking down the hall randomly, he just came up to me and put his head on my chest pretty tight. And he said, I want to listen to your heart. I want to hear how your heart beats. And he did that for a few seconds and then just walked away. And at the time, I didn't think anything of it. But later years, I always remember that as just one of those weird little things that Jeff Dahmer did.
Yeah, I know in the movie it addresses something similar to that, where he's in the hotel room with the one black student and he's asking if his insides would be the same color as Jeff's insides and stuff.
Right. Yeah, so he always had an interest in biology, that's for sure. He did like to cut fish open, and he stole the fetal pig. Man, did I laugh about that when he stole the pig from biology class, because I didn't know he did that. And then later on, I heard about it, that he had stolen the pig many years later. And when I saw that in the movie, to me, that was one of the funniest scenes. I mean, it's not funny to anybody else, but just knowing Dahmer, his sense of humor and stealing the pig, that's just such a funny thing to do in a way.
Were you aware of the whole science experiments and stuff?
Not as much as other people. Some people that lived on his street, on his road, probably knew more about it than I did, because they'd walk up to his house and stuff. And you got to remember that little clubhouse where he did stuff like that, that was gone by about, I don't know, maybe our junior year or something. His dad made him get rid of all that stuff. But I wasn't really aware of that was going on at home. I mean, my experience was seeing him at school mostly. If I went over to his house, that was just, very, very brief, and didn't spend much time at the Dahmer house. His parents didn't get along, as everybody knows, so it was not a place you wanted to hang out or anything. But I didn't really know about his science experiments. I knew he liked science. I knew he liked biology. And I knew he liked cutting things open. That's for sure.
Yeah. It's a big focus in the book, in the movie, sort of his messed up home life. What was it kind of really like? Did you have many experiences with his parents? I know they didn't get along, but did they not get along to the extent that's portrayed, or just what was his family life like?
To be honest, I can't say much about that at all. I didn't see a lot of his family life. You know, you all have everybody has friends in high school, and some friends you hang out at their homes, you get to know their parents, you eat dinner over there, and then other friends you really never spend time at their house. You just sort of maybe pick them up with your car, or you see them at school, and you never really get to know their families. And I think Jeff Dahmer was sort of that way. Maybe he was even a little embarrassed by his family, and it wasn't a real welcoming place to go over and hang out. And I can't say much about his family. I knew his dad better than his mom. I saw his mom a few times, talked to his mom a couple times, and she was different. She had issues, I think, don't we all? But
Yeah.
his dad was a nice guy. His dad's still around. His dad taught a lot of people tennis, gave tennis lessons, and his dad was a friendly person. You know, I often wonder how he's taken all this stuff. I know it's something you can't even imagine, but yeah.
And I know
That's
it.
all-
What were you saying? I didn't mean to cut you off.
that was about all about his family life. I mean, I knew his little brother a little bit, but that was about it.
That was what I was about to ask about his little brother. I know he like changed his name and is like sort of off the grid now. But did you have any memories of anything that he did? Because I know like in the movie, it's sort of like Jeff like kind of like blows him off all the time. But I just didn't know if you knew anything about him at that time.
Well, you know, when think about it, when you're like 16 or 17 years old, you don't think much of like a 12-year-old hanging around or 13-year-old. You don't pay any attention to him really. And he was just a nice kid, his little brother. I mean, I can't think of anything specific about him. He was friendly and just a nice, smiling kid. And I'm pretty sure he's an attorney now. He's a lawyer somewhere. He was really smart. And I heard he went to law school and practices law. But that's about all I knew. Now, I also heard he was valedictorian of his high school class. He didn't go to Revere. He went to another school later. So, but that's about all I know about his brother.
Yeah. So I guess back to high school. I guess we can sort of get into a little bit of the differences between the film and the book in real life, because I know in the book I think there's four members of the Dahmer Fan Club and Jeff, and then in the
Yep.
movie there's three in Jeff. But I remember you telling me when you came to visit the set a few times that it was actually a much larger group of people, and it wasn't really called the Dahmer Fan Club, but there was a much bigger like group of friends.
Yeah, those ideas are probably correct, what you just said. It was a larger group of friends. There were more like 5 or 6 or 7 of us even that hung around and did stuff in high school together. And the Dahmer Fan Club, that's just sort of a funny name, that sort of an afterthought to all this. But you know, it was larger than the group in the movie. Obviously, in the movie, you can't have so many people; it's too many characters, and obviously, the personalities of the guys playing us in the movies, the characters in the movie, are different than reality. I'd say too, quite a bit.
Well, you made the cut, so how does that feel?
Well, I probably made the cut because I was pretty close with John Backdorf, I'd say, and since he wrote the book, he had to put me in there and in the movie, and I think I offered a lot of ideas or memories, more than ideas. I offered memories about high school days and junior high days about Jeff Dahmer. So, yeah, I made the cut. That was a lot of fun. Used my name in it. You know, I didn't have a problem with that. I said, yeah, what's the difference?
Yeah.
So it was fun. It was fun.
I guess sort of on the topic of like the Dahmer Fan Club being an afterthought, like the name of it and all that. I remember you telling me that Durf actually was not called Durf in high school, and then when he just sort of wrote his book, you're like, what the hell's a Durf?
Well, like lots of artists, they pick a name, a pen name to use, and Durf became his name. I think that's what his wife called him in college. I think that's where that came from. But no, he was always back Durf or John. I'd never heard anyone ever call him Durf in high school. That was a name that came later, I think, in his college career, but from his wife. But anyways, yeah, he was back Durf. I was Koo Crawl. I'm not going to give you all the other names. Some people
Yeah.
would probably be more private about that. I could blurt them all out, but you met a couple of them anyways.
Yeah. So you guys spent high school together, and obviously you contributed some stuff to the book. What were some of the things you told Durf when it came? Well, I guess, how did you feel originally when Durf said he was going to write a book?
I said it was a good idea because somebody should do it. Because there's a lot of crappy books out there about Jeff Dahmer, and they're almost all about his killings and murders and trial. And there's hardly anything about his high school days. I mean, his dad wrote a book, A Father's Story. It's a very strange book to read, I think. But that book is more about raising Jeff Dahmer, especially at a young age, raising him, bringing him up from a parent's perspective. But nobody had ever done anything about our high school days. And when Backdorf told me he was going to do that, or he was working on it, I thought that's a great idea. In a couple of ways, it'll help people to understand that serial killers like Jeff Dahmer can come from, a good school, a good neighborhood, a decent family, a good environment, and yet here's what happens to them after high school, after later in life. And the other thing is, I knew it would be a lucrative thing for Backdorf to do. It would be a good seller because the way it is, American culture, we're always interested in serial killers. We buy stuff, we watch movies, we watch A&E biography, Serial Killer Week and all that. We know about Ted Bundy and all these other guys. So I knew it would work out pretty well, and I knew Backdorf had the ability to put it together or something that'd be an honest work, and it'd be fun to read. And we had a lot of fun in high school. That was the thing, too. I don't want to paint our high school days as something dark and evil at all. We had a lot of fun in high school, and we did a lot of crazy stuff, and sometimes Dahmer was part of that, sometimes he wasn't.
Cool. You mentioned the one weird thing where he put put his head on your chest. Do you remember anything else weird that wasn't necessarily in the book or in the movie?
About Jeff? Not really. I mean, it's hard to think back. This is 40 plus years ago. Think about that. This is more than 40 years ago now. We just had our class reunion this year, 40 years. And that's a long time to think back about specific things, because at the time you're not paying much attention to it, because Jeff Dahmer is not, you're not planning on him being a serial killer. I don't know if he was planning on being a serial killer either.
Yeah.
But so you don't pay a lot of attention to stuff happening. And it's more like your memories. You're jogging your memories, and you have these, oh yeah, he did that, he did this. But I think other than the book, everything that's in the book, we really scratched our brains coming up with ideas sometimes for the book, and I think we put everything in there. I mean, I heard he stole a car once in high school or right after high school, and we laughed about that, but we don't know if that really happened. And we know he got stoned a few times smoking pot at the country club around there with this other kid who's never been part of the story. Just some stories like that that I've heard. He did drink. He did have a drinking issue going on there in high school, but I can't think of a specific one. I know a lot of things that happened where it had to be turned around in the movie or changed around for the movie, and I can appreciate that. That's artistic license to make a better story.
Yeah, I know there are a few differences from that, and I'll touch upon those in a little bit, but what were some of the, major differences between the book and the movie and what actually happened?
Oh, man. Now I'm going to get into trouble with Backdorf. I just talked to him last night, actually, Backdorf. Not about this at all, just trying to get him to come to our campus and give a talk to our students about being an illustrator and everything else he does. Anyhow, yeah, well, I think the book captures a lot of the time period. That's what I like about it. It really captures the end of the 1970s and high school and I wouldn't even call it suburban, but rural Ohio. I mean, we were 30 miles out of Cleveland, and it was fairly rural yet back in the 60s and 70s. Like I said, my grandparents had a farm down the road from the Dahmer house. I think the book is a neat insight into those days, and I think some of the personalities, I read a lot more into them than other people could because I knew the people. when I see our librarian in high school, I remember her so clearly, and I remember Jeff Dahmer just yelling her name out at the top of his lungs in the library, and she never knew it was him. She never knew it was him doing that kind of stuff. And I can just visualize that happening and remember it happening so well. And stuff like that. I don't think the book created any fiction. I really don't. I think everything in the book basically happened. It's several sources confirmed it. Sources being eyewitnesses, other guys from high school, really, and other people. I can't really think of anything in the book that didn't happen. Maybe, of course, it's exaggerated a little bit to make it a better
Of course,
story.
yeah.
You have to do that. But yeah, I thoroughly enjoyed the book in a positive way, as something other people could read and say, hey, oh man, this is good. It's funny, but it's also dark. It's also about a troubled kid. It's also about, people with problems and unrecognized problems. I mean, who recognizes those kind of teenage problems Jeff Dahmer had going on in his mind that none of us really saw or would think about?
Yeah. Yeah. So one of the last scenes of the book is you and Durf and a couple of your other friends, like many years later, just sort of sitting in a coffee shop, and you guys are talking, and you say something about like, oh, what if Jeff was a serial killer or something like that. Did that actually happen?
That actually happened. That was at Arabica in Coventry, I think. If you know that coffee shop, I think it's gone now, but up in Coventry in Cleveland, I think we got together because Backdorf lived in Cleveland then, and so did some of my other friends. I lived in Athens, Ohio at the time. I lived in Athens for a long time. And we got together and we were talking about high school stuff. Maybe this was around the time of our 5-year reunion. I don't remember, or 10-year reunion. And we were talking about people who showed up or who didn't show up. And somehow Dahmer's name came up. And as soon as his name came up, we just all laughed and said, what the hell? Whatever happened to that guy? Who knows? Someone said, well, I heard he was in the Army. Someone else said, well, I heard he went to Ohio State for a while. And then, saying that he's probably a serial killer was just like the funniest thing to us. And that is absolute truth. That came up immediately that, oh yeah, he's probably a serial killer. And we just laughed and laughed about that. And that's a true story. Very true.
And so that was probably like 5 or 7 or 8 years before anything had come out, right?
Something like that. I'd say probably about 5 years before. Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
So you mentioned that when it came to writing the book, you kind of helped Durf kind of remember some things, because obviously it takes a very it was a long time ago, so obviously people's memories are going to be fuzzy. Do you remember what, besides like the finale of the book, like the car ride, what else did you sort of contribute to the book?
Well, I reminded back the fact that how Dahmer would sit in the library and yell out the librarian's name and never be a suspect in that. But I'm sure he remembered that too. But I think bringing it up helps. Him cutting a fish open when he went fishing with some of us at a fish pond, cutting that open, that story. I brought that up, I think, too. These were common stories that we all sort of knew, but it was hard to remember them. The one that was actually, and then of course the command performance where we all went to Summit Mall. That, I was right there too, and that was really a funny day. I mean, it was just such a crazy high school day. It was one of those high school days where it's like being in a high school movie from the 80s or something. Just a funny event that whoever ever could plan something like that to happen, go into the mall and have Dahmer, spaz out and stuff, and follow him around and watch his antics. He did that. That was Dahmer's idea, by the way. He did that to raise money so he could have some beer money to go out and buy beer. That was all Dahmer's idea. He said, I'll go to the mall and freak out and do all these things, but I want some money for it. I want to be paid for it. I don't know how much he made. He made maybe $20, something like that, $30, and free beer.
Because I know in the movie, I know in the movie that's portrayed as sort of like a dark moment, but you're saying it was his idea to do that?
Yeah, it was Jeff's idea to do that. It wasn't like we put him up to that at all. A lot of things Jeff initiated very quietly. He's like, I need some beer money. Here's what I can do. How about if I go to the mall? It was always something like that. And then somebody would tell you, say, hey, you know what Dahmer wants to do? He wants us to take him to the mall. He's going to get drunk and he's going to go around, and we don't really know what he's going to do, but he's going to create a scene or something. And so he wants some money though to do that. He wants to make some beer money for drinking, and that was all Dahmer's idea. That wasn't our idea to do that.
Yeah. So I guess another thing that's sort of portrayed as dark in the movie is the final like car ride scene, with him and Durf. But in real life, that was with you. So what can you tell us about that?
I'll need to talk to Mark Myers about that one. But yeah, that was my big scene, right, in the book, and that actually gave an ending to the book in a way, too. I mean, a finality to our memories of Jeff Dahmer. And that's my last memory of him, and that's the last time any of us saw him, of my whole gang of friends. That's the last time we ever saw him at home there. And yeah, I gave him a ride home, and it was late, and it was after a party, after the summer after high school in June, after we all graduated, and it was a party back, I think, on Hametown Road or Route 18 somewhere. And I was driving home, and there he's walking down the road, 2 a.m. or something, and I stopped, and he got in the car and didn't say much at all. And I knew he had a lot to drink, and took him to his house, and his house was all dark, but it was like 2 a.m. in the morning or 1 a.m. or something, so that wasn't unusual. And I pulled in the driveway at the Dahmer house, which you know well now, and didn't say too much. I'm like, what are you going to do in the fall? You going to college or whatever? And that's about, and I don't even remember his response, if he said Ohio State or what. And I know he had some beers on him, too, in his jacket that he was wearing inside of pockets. And that was about it. That's the last time I saw Jeff Dahmer, and he got out and left. And what we learned later, well, a couple things about this. First, I was never afraid of him. I never thought he was going to pull something on me or hit me with a bat or attack me or anything like that. There was no fear whatsoever of Jeff Dahmer. He was just another kid from high school, and we had no reason to be afraid of him. And, and I said, bye, and we'll see you around. And he got out, went into his house. And that was about the end of that. I drove home, got home pretty late that night. And, we were all just 18 years old in those days. But the thing that's spooky about that is, and I give Backdorf a lot of credit for this, putting the timeline together of Dahmer's first killing. It was that June after high school. And as everybody knows, he killed another kid from another high school that he picked up hitchhiking to a concert. And then he eventually cut the body up in the house there, hid the body parts underneath the house for a while and cut it up and spread it over the woods and awful things like that. Well, the timeline is probably about the same time I gave him a ride home. That body may have been laying in his parents' kitchen, or it might have been under the house in the crawl space, or he might have just cut it all up and put it in bags ready to take it to a dump, or he may have just spread it in the backyard in the woods. I don't know, but in hindsight, looking back, it's sort of freaky and bizarre that he maybe had done this already, or maybe not. But there was never a time we thought anything bad or dangerous about Jeff Dahmer. But yeah, I can always remember that night, and it still is a little spooky to me now. It wasn't then, but it is now. I mean, I can hear Dahmer's voice. I can see his eyes. He had real light blue, pale eyes. That's one of the differences between him and Ross Lynch. I mean, when I looked into Ross's eyes, I could see Ross Lynch in the eyes. But if I looked at Ross overall, then I saw Jeff Dahmer.
Yeah. I guess let's sort of talk about Ross as Jeff Dahmer, because you met him on set, obviously. You came on. I know I overheard him talking on set to Jeff one day. He was like, you got to take the glasses off. You're reminding me too much of Jeff. So, like, how...
Well, yeah. The movie, I thoroughly enjoyed the movie. I mean, to me, as someone who was there, I mean, who gets a chance to watch a movie about your high school days with a serial killer? I mean, think about that. And so the movie experience was just a pretty amazing thing for me. And there's a lot of humor in it that I see that other people don't. The day I showed up on the set, because I knew it was being filmed, I was out west in Oregon, actually, and I got back to Indiana here getting ready for classes, and then I knew the movie was going to be in the Dahmer house, and I hadn't been in that house since high school days. Actually, a side note to that, before the Dahmers bought the house, that was where my piano teacher lived, and Mrs. Ahrens. And the Ahrens family built that house, and Mrs. Ahrens gave piano lessons to a lot of kids all in the neighborhood back there. So people knew the Dahmer house before the Dahmers bought it as a place where the piano teacher lived, Mrs. Ahrens. Very nice lady. And so when the movie was being shot, I decided, hey, I'm going to make the 6-hour drive from Indiana, and I'm going to go over there, and I want to see what's going on. I wasn't sure who Ross Lynch was. I had to look him up, and then I had to watch the Disney Channel for a while.
Yeah.
And I said, oh, okay, that's the guy. I see who he is now. And so I drive up there, and it's a hot, humid summer day, end of August or something, and I park my car down at the hill, bottom of the hill, because I didn't want to disturb anything. I didn't want to cause noise, and I didn't know what was happening, and I didn't know if it's going to be a real close set and the people are going to be real jerks to me or whatever. And so I park my car way down the hill, and I walk up there, and I walk up the hill quietly, and it's sort of all these old memories are cascading back into my head, and I'm thinking about Jeff Dahmer now and his parents and even his little brother, and I'm thinking back to years before, and I'm thinking about all this stuff. It's just coming back. And this is in the morning. This is like 10 a.m. Yeah. And I walk up to the driveway, and nobody's around at all in the driveway. Everybody's inside the house working, except for two people in the driveway. And one of them was Ross Lynch. and Ross Lynch and some other guy, I don't know who it was, I don't remember now, but they were standing there talking. And I thought, that's Jeff Dahmer. That's the guy playing Jeff Dahmer. I'm going to go say hi to him. And he was so friendly. You know, he wasn't sure who I was. And actually, just before I got to him, some wild woman came running out of the house yelling at me to get out of there. I don't know who. But she came running out of the house. No, get away! And I'm like, wait, whoa, you know. And I walk up to Ross, and he shakes my hand before even knowing who I am. I could tell he was a nice kid, and I'm used to these guys. That's what I teach. I teach people his age in college, so I'm around them all the time. And I told him who I was, and he gives me a big hug, and he is like the friendliest guy. Yeah. And he's like, you got to meet Harry. You got to meet the guy playing you. Oh, you got to meet Harry. He's gone today, but he'll be glad to meet you. It's too bad he's not here. And I'm like, I'm going to be around a couple days. And he thought that was great. And he was busy. He had to get back inside. They were filming a scene with Mr. Burlman.
Yes.
Which also cracked me up so much because, that's something we didn't talk about, and a lot of guys from my crowd of friends are glad that's not really in the movie or in the book about Mr. Burlman, because we did sort of make fun of this poor man. We didn't know much about his condition. I never saw him in person, but I heard him on the telephone because we made some prank phone calls to his office and trying to hire him as a decorator. And his voice on the phone was just so funny to us, but we really didn't realize the illness that he had. And but that's when I met Ross Lynch, and it turned out he was, a great guy, and I really like Ross. And I think his portrayal of Jeff Dahmer is great. I mean, first of all, the physical appearance, he's about the right height and the hair and everything else. He could do that persona pretty well. I think Jeff Dahmer was maybe a little more subdued in some of his reactions in high school. He wasn't so, spastic when he did things, but you have to exaggerate stuff. I know that making a movie. Yeah. And I can't imagine anyone else playing Jeff Dahmer right now. I mean, I don't know who's out there, but I'm glad they got Ross to do that because it's pretty phenomenal.
Yeah.
Pretty phenomenal, Jeff.
You mentioned the Mr. Broman and the prank phone calls, and I don't know if you're aware of this, but actually, our first day of shooting the film, it was like an early or like mid-August or something like that. Our very first day of shooting, we actually shot a scene, and I believe it was supposed to be your basement, where you and the other guys are hanging out, and you're prank calling Mr. Burlman, and it ended up getting cut from the film. But I guess that's just a fun fact for the viewers out there, and for you, I didn't know if you were aware that that was a scene, but it ultimately didn't make it into the final cut.
I had no idea there was a scene like that. Yeah, that's something we did at somebody's basement. We'd call different people. He was just one of the persons. You have to realize that prank calls were a big thing to do back in those days with landlines, before cell phones, and before everyone was on the phone all the time, and you didn't know, if it was real or not. But to call different businesses and to request things and to do things, we always called him up and told him that we were going to be moving. We were a company and going to be relocating there, and if he can do all the decorating for us and all the design work of our new office building. And so we did that for a few weeks on and off. And I wasn't very good speaking on the phone. It usually wasn't me because I'd crack up, but some of the other guys could do it. And we tape recorded those. And we'd play them back all the time. And I know somebody still has those tapes, maybe. I don't know. It's a long time ago. But, you're not happy about some of the things you do when you're 15 or 16 years old. I mean, the movie was all made into our senior year. And a lot of the stuff that happened in the movie happened more like when we were 15 or 16, not 17 or 18. And there's definitely a different set of brainwaves going on between a 15-year-old kid and a senior in high school.
Yeah, I mean the film definitely took some creative licenses, and I think it works out because it's sort of like you want to tell the best story you can tell, and if it's not exactly historically accurate, I mean at least it's an entertaining movie. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah, definitely. One time I told the director about the music in the prom scene. It was just a rehearsal anyways, but I said to him, one of the few times I really talked to him about what he was doing. I tried to stay out of his way. I understand being a professional and let him go at it, and it's his deal, it's his thing. But they were playing a song for the dance rehearsal at the prom that had not come out when we were in high school. It came out like my freshman or sophomore year of college. Like 1980, maybe it came out. And I told him that. I said, that song didn't come out for a couple of years after we graduated.
Yeah.
And you know what he told me? He said, we're making a movie, not a documentary.
Yeah.
And it really hit me. I thought, man, that's a great answer. We're making a movie, not a documentary. You are exactly right. And that's true. It's a portrait of Jeffrey Dahmer's high school days, and it's a movie. It's not a documentary.
Yeah.
And that's how you can appreciate it and enjoy it.
Yeah, and I guess in the end, the music kind of gets, like, dubbed over because they just kind of use the dancing and they put their own music to it anyway. But I guess there was another similar thing with that. There was some controversy, like, early on where Durf got mad that there were some comic books, like, in a shot or something that weren't out yet either. So that wasn't just you that brought up things about that, so...
Just little details about historical accuracy that don't really change anything. For me or anybody else watching it. I mean, the story is about Jeff Dahmer and his world, his high school world, how he saw things, and junior high really too. So and his dad is great in that movie. Dallas, the actor, he is just phenomenal playing Mr. Dahmer. I mean, I appreciate his acting so well in that film. That's one of the highlights for me, is to watch him play Mr. Dahmer. Also somebody playing me, it's not so much me because it's who knew my personality when the movie was made. And Harry Holzer, I have to give, a couple thumbs up to. He's a fun guy to talk to, very nice kid too. Hope he's doing well. And, playing me, I think he did a great job. He had sort of an edge maybe that I didn't have in high school, though. He was a little more edgier and a little more... that's okay. That's all right, but that's artistic license. But it was all fun, and I hope people can see that in watching a movie like this. The movie's about Jeff Dahmer and his high school days and his world. And unfortunately, who would ever imagine the things that he did later in life? Soon after high school. Soon after high school.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned the portrayal of yourself because I was just about to ask about that. One thing I was curious about, and I'm not exactly serious, I'm kind of like joking, but like I know that your character in the film wears overalls in basically every scene. Was that your style back then, or was that a creative choice?
Man, I knew you were going to bring that up. I get so much crap about that. That's the first thing I hear from everybody who sees this. All my students who see this movie, they all say, "Did you really dress like that in high school?" Never, never, never. I never wore overalls, coveralls, painter pants. I never dressed that way. If anything, I dressed like Backdurf because we all dressed about the same. We wore blue jeans and a flannel shirt. And that was or a t-shirt. And that was about our high school fashion statement that most of us had in those times and at the end of the 70s. But there were guys that dressed that way, that wore coveralls and overalls, and one of the guys in our group did dress that way, and I have to imagine the wonderful work done by the person in charge of costumes. I'd have to say that she probably looked at our high school yearbooks to help out, and there's pictures of guys dressed that way, but not me. I was... Not me. Come on. I told Harry that, and I said, I can't believe you're wearing these white overalls. And the prom stuff, the clothes he had at prom, that unbelievable. Just unbelievable.
That was another thing, the prom scene. I guess, I don't know if this was Mark's decision or whatever, but they actually, not only did they steal your finale, but they stole your prom date, too.
Yeah, they did. Yeah, the prom, actually, the reality, I mean, it's no big deal, but I went to the prom with Martha Schmidt, and I'll give you her name because she says a lot about Jeff Dahmer. She's often interviewed about Jeff Dahmer, too. Martha's a really great person. I went to prom with her. Backdurf did not attend the prom. He was not there at all. He did not go to the prom. So I was there at the prom, and Jeff Dahmer was at the prom, and I do remember seeing him there. I don't remember talking to him at the prom hardly at all, and I did know he left to go get food at McDonald's because someone was joking about that later. But yeah, the prom scene, I think it's a pretty good thing. But yeah, a little bit of what went on there was more me or some of the other guys, and maybe a little less of John Backdurf, but I can understand. I mean, I can understand. You got to make a story out of it, and Backdurf was one of the main characters in the story.
How did you feel about Alex Wolff's portrayal of Durf in the film?
Oh, that's a tough one. Well, first of all, of course, you met Backdurf, so you know what he looks like, and Alex is a little bit shorter, and I think he did a thoughtful performance of a high school kid, but I think my own time with John Backdurf with Durf is he was a little more introverted. He was a little more shy. You know, he's one of these artists who is great at drawing and doodling and stuff like that, and he was more introverted, I'd say. I mean, he's going to get on me about this now, but I'd say he was much more introverted than the rest of us and quiet, and I don't know if that comes out with Alex playing him in the movie, but that's my interpretation of it.
Yeah, I do sort of agree with you, but I think Alex did do a good job for his interpretation, and he's doing really well now. He was in that Hereditary film that's getting a lot of Oscar buzz and all that, so he's doing well for himself. So,
well, that's good. Yeah, you know, I hope all these guys do well. I don't know what Ross Lynch is doing other than his music. I mean, it seems like he's doing a lot with music with his band and his family, but I don't know what other films.
He's actually about to be in they shot it and everything already, but he's about to be in the remake of Sabrina the Teenage Witch as like the male interest or whatever.
Okay, cool. I keep in touch with Harry Holzer, you know, and I keep in touch with him by email and stuff, and and texting and whatever. And he won't tell me what he's up to. He says it's a big secret and it's something really great. So I don't know if that's a bunch of BS or, he's just such a wise ass. And he is or was going to Harvard. I knew that, but I'm not sure if he's taking a break from it maybe and doing some other stuff right now. But he's another guy I hope to stay in touch with.
Yeah.
Fun.
So I guess we talked about how you felt when Durf wrote the book, but what was your initial thought when the book was going to be a movie?
When I heard the book was going to be a movie, I thought, oh no, uh-oh. I know what people do with movies from books and how they'll probably put the setting in California, and I'm gonna hate that. Because first, I'm a geography professor, and places are very important to us. That's what we study. We study places and locations, and I thought, I bet it's going to be set in California or Wisconsin or New York or somewhere else. That's going to be horrible. And then I thought, how are they ever going to portray our high school days? And, but they have to put it in that time period, I thought. And so I was a little excited about it. And, of course, I wonder, who's going to play me? That's what everybody thinks, right? And I knew some people were way too old, like Brad Pitt. But I also thought I hope to God they get characters who are high school age and not 35 years old.
Yeah.
Like some TV shows and other movies, they always have actors who are 35 playing high school kids. And I hate that. I really despise that. And then when I heard it's going to be in the Dahmer house, I said, right on, man. That is exactly where it needs to be. It has to be in the Dahmer house. It has to be in Bath Township and Revere High School, which it was not, but close enough. Yeah. And then I heard that the guys playing Dahmer and the rest of us, I started looking them up online and saying, yeah, they're the right age. That'll work. If they know what they're doing, they're the right age, to do that. And that was very important to me. To do that. And then I had to just let it go and wait and see the results. I mean, if it was going to be based on Durf's book, I knew the book was fairly accurate, and I knew the movie would probably have to follow that. And I'm glad it wasn't some kind of movie that included a final scene of him cutting up the guy that he murdered.
Yeah.
In 70. I'm glad that I really like the ending with him picking up that kid and driving off. And that's the end. I really like that ending quite a bit. So I was excited about the movie. I didn't know if it was going to be real low budget. I thought, oh man, I hope there's some money behind this. At least they can make it a decent movie. And then I thought, well, maybe it's going to be some big Hollywood production, and it's going to be over the top, and it's going to be sort of fake. And I think it just was right. I mean, it was just right. And I give a lot to all the producers and the director that they made something better than I expected it to be.
Yeah,
go ahead.
No, I was going to say they kept it classy because, like you said, it would have been so easy to show him, doing horrific things at the end or all that. But they stayed true to sticking with the Jeff Dahmer who was not a killer and Jeff Dahmer who was just the weird high school kid. So
Exactly. Like I said, I was very happy with the movie and how it came out. And there's things that are made up. There's things that are not true in the movie, but it's fine. It's okay. And sometimes that'll always be just a secret between me and my friends in high school to know what really happened and what didn't happen when we watched that movie.
Yeah, I know. Actually, I was sitting in the row in front of you at the premiere of it, and you and your friends were cracking up the whole time. So I could tell you enjoyed it. So.
We were the only ones in the full theater, cracking up and laughing during a movie about a serial killer. Think about that, because it is a dark subject matter. But for us, you can't do anything but laugh about these times because it's so awful that it's your way to cope with the reality that you grew up with a serial killer, with Jeff Dahmer, a cannibal. Yeah. That you were in gym class with him and wrestled him in gym class and worked in biology class with him, dissecting things, and took German class with him in high school. I remember that, and how he always skipped German class and would just be outside the school drinking and looking in the window through the classroom door, and the teacher never caught him and stuff. And just wacky stuff like that.
Yeah, I guess for me personally, the first time I watched it, I wasn't really laughing because I worked under the I was Mark Meyer's like assistant on the film, the director. So the first time I viewed it, I was just kind of trying to like take it all in because I was like so excited to see all the stuff we got put together. But I've seen it 2 times since then, and I find myself laughing every time, just like you do, because I'm thinking of just like the fond memories I had making the film, and especially for me because I was also Ross's sort of like stand-in, like stunt double. So every time he spazzes out, what the audience doesn't know is that it was me spazzing out like right before they started rolling, just to do like the camera test and all that. So I think the movie is hilarious too, just for like different reasons. So.
Well, everybody sees it different. I can see you being the stand-in for Ross. You look just like him. No, I'm just, but
They
yeah,
just,
there's different things that go on. You know what I want to talk to Ross about? If you're out there listening in Radioland or whatever this is, we need to do a musical follow-up. We
yeah.
need to do My Friend Dahmer the musical, and Ross Lynch is perfect for the role. I mean, there we go. We'll do it.
Yeah.
The new musical, get Hamilton out of the way, and we'll have Dahmer on Broadway.
I guess sort of as we close things out on the movie aspect of things, you mentioned obviously there's a lot of things that are changed, a lot of things that were added for the movie, and one of the things that was not added for the movie but might be exaggerated a little bit, I'm not really sure, maybe you can clarify on that, but one of the things that's like so crazy that you would think it has to be made up was the character of Fig, and I remember you saying that that was an actual guy.
The character of Fig is an actual guy. Unfortunately, I'd say he was miscast quite a bit. The guy that played him was great. I mean, I talked to him a couple times, and in the movie he's fine. But the real Fig is someone much more demented and low key, and probably most of us guessed that he was the serial killer when we first heard there was a serial killer from our high school class. Most of us probably guessed Fig, which was not his real name, of course. We did find out he has quite a criminal record, and still lives back home there in the area. But I think that the character in the movie is not portrayed too well. Fig was a little more psycho in a way, in a quiet way. I remember just walking down the hallway in school one day, in junior high, like 7th grade, and carrying a whole bunch of books. I was trying to be a good student and all that. And Fig came up behind me and just kicked with his foot all the books that were under my arm, kicked them all out in the hallway. And it was a busy time between classes, and I'm trying to pick up all my books and paperwork. And the principal came out, happened to see us, and sent us both to his office to sit there and wait. And I waited and waited, and I sat there with Fig, and then the principal comes in, and the principal looks at me, and he says, "You get out of here. Go back to your class." And then he turned to Fig, and before I left the room, I could hear him just go into a rage about Fig again and again and again and again in the principal's office. So, Fig was a really different kind of character, but a real psycho, a person that was soft-spoken and strange and goofy and a big kid. And like in gym class, when we had to run around the track and do a couple laps, he refused to do it. He just walked very slowly, and he sang as he walked slowly around the track, waving his arms, and he was just a very bizarre character. And I haven't seen him since high school. But yeah, different than the portrayal in the movie, I would say.
Yeah, so like you said, when you heard the news someone in your class was a serial killer, everyone just kind of assumed it was him because he was the one that was like wacky, and Jeff was just kind of quiet, like no one really thought anything of it, but he was really the one that was more demented. And I don't know if I should mention this or not, but if I shouldn't, I can cut it out or whatever, but he was closer with Jeff than a lot of people, and some believe maybe he kind of knew about the first murder or stuff that was going on. It's not confirmed or anything, but
it's not confirmed. But Durf and I have talked about that, and so have several other guys from high school. We think he may know about the first murder. We think that's something Dahmer may have told him, that would have been funny to him in some dark way. There were probably some other things that went on between them too. And a lot of that happened, I'd say, the second half of our senior year, when we really sort of broke away. Not intentionally, but we just didn't see Jeff Dahmer around hardly at all the second half of our senior year. He really was drinking more and hung out with this guy, with this big character more, and was going down, a darker path, I'd say, than most of us that were pretty carefree in those days and looking forward to graduation and college and having fun. And, we were a pretty happy-go-lucky crowd, I'd say. And it was a great high school. It was a lot of fun growing up there. It was a great place to grow up. I have to add that, too.
Yeah. So the last time you saw him was that car ride. You hear the news, he was a serial killer, he's arrested, all that. And I think you mentioned that only, one person, went to go see him in prison and Jeff wouldn't see them or something like that?
Yeah, I think it was Martha, my prom date. Like I said, she's a sociologist. She tried to see him, and she never made it. That, as far as what I heard, he didn't want to see anybody, Jeff Dahmer. And that was in Wisconsin. He was up there in Wisconsin. He wasn't back in Ohio or anything. But that's what I heard. I mean, I don't know if that's absolutely true or not about Martha, but I think I heard that from her or somebody else over the years. And, I didn't hear the news. I heard the news about Jeff Dahmer completely different than everybody else in my class, because I was not in this country. Geographers like to be in other countries as often as possible.
Yeah.
And I was a graduate student. I was still in graduate school then. And I was overseas studying in Prague, in what was then Czechoslovakia. And I'd been there a year and a half. And so I'd been totally out of touch because I just went through a revolution. I was in the middle of the Velvet Revolution in 1989 in Prague, and I've written a book about that and all that kind of stuff. And then here it is the next summer, and I'm almost ready to go back home. I'm thinking about the whole year I spent here and the revolution and everything that went on, and what an amazing time and unbelievable, and all these people that I met this year. And then I made a trip to go visit some friends before I left the country, and it was August. And I bought a newspaper for the train ride because it was like a 5-hour trip, and I usually didn't buy a newspaper, but I did. It was the International Herald Tribune, printed in English. And I'm on page 3 or 4 reading it on this train, and I turn the page, and there's a photograph of the Dahmer house. The Dahmer house on Bath Road that I knew very well. And I thought, what the heck? I recognize that house. There's no photograph of Jeff Dahmer or anybody or any of his victims, but there's a photograph of this house. And I read the caption underneath the photo, and the caption said, "The house in which Mr. Dahmer has admitted to his first killing."
Jeez.
And I thought, Mr. Dahmer, Lionel has killed somebody. Because it said the house in which Mr. Dahmer admitted to his first killing. And I thought, Mr. Dahmer, Lionel Dahmer Sr., he killed somebody. Unbelievable. He probably killed his wife. And then I start reading the article. I'm sitting on this train by myself with nobody to talk to. And the first paragraph of the article is, Jeffrey Dahmer, who has admitted to killing and dismembering and cannibalizing 17 young men and boys in Milwaukee. And that's about as far as I got. And I read that paragraph a dozen times and sat on this train by myself for the next 3 or 4 hours with nobody to talk to about this, and tried to have this sink in. And it was and there was no more news about it. I had no more details. The story had broken like a week before, but I just heard it now. So it didn't give a lot of details, this article in the international newspaper.
Yeah.
And I couldn't find out any more information. I knew I'd be home in 3 or 4 days. And when I got home, Mom and Dad are there at the dining room table, and I come in. They haven't seen me in over a year, and I come in, and I'm sitting down. They pick me up at the airport and stuff. And my mom says to me as we're eating lunch, she goes, "Did you know Jeffrey Dahmer?" I said, "Mom, of course I did. We all did in high school. You know that." And then she gave me all the newspaper articles and magazines and she had saved and everything from the last couple weeks. And then, of course, it was on the news like 24 hours a day. And, of course, everybody from high school class had all talked to each other about it except me because I was overseas. So if I called somebody up, they'd say, "Oh, yeah, well, we all talked about that. It's so strange. It's so crazy. It's unbelievable." But they didn't have any more to talk about.
Yeah.
And I sort of missed out that initial break in the story. I missed being interviewed by the local cops who interviewed everybody they could from high school days about Jeff Dahmer and stuff. And, we just had our class reunion and that hardly came up at all. Hardly anyone brought up Jeff Dahmer or the movie or the book. It hardly came up at all in conversation. A memorial was read to classmates who had died since high school, and of the maybe 8 or 9 names, Jeff Dahmer's name was one of them. But that was just the only place it came up at our reunion.
What was the first reunion like after the news broke?
Yeah, that's a good question. After the news broke, that was a bigger topic, of course. I mean, we had a reunion. It wasn't until let me calculate that out a little bit. 5. Well, I guess we had one a couple years after that. After the news broke, 2 years later, we had a reunion, and that was much more of a conversation. Everybody just about talked about Jeff Dahmer who wanted to. Obviously, there's a bunch of folks who don't want anything at all to do with Jeff Dahmer or his memory or talking about him, and they get very upset with you if you bring it up. They're just like, "Oh, don't even bring up that name. I don't want to hear it, and I can't believe, you're talking about him. I don't want to hear that name at all. Don't bring it up." And there's a lot of people like that from high school days, too.
Yeah. So I guess, you kind of talked about this a little bit, but like, what kind of goes through your head? I mean, obviously not many people have had that moment that's like, my friend is a serial killer. Like, what, I guess if you can even explain it, like, what was your thought about it back then? I mean, you sat on the train for like 3 hours, and what's kind of your perspective on it now?
Well, at that time, I had a really strange feeling. When you read a book and they talk about my blood curdled and all this, you think, what the heck are they talking about? But I understand that a little more now because I sat there and I felt like I was falling through the seat that I was sitting in, that I was falling down through the train and descending to the tracks and was like submerged and couldn't breathe. And that's how I felt at that time. And it was a feeling that was just so bizarre. And then I sort of tried to put it out of my mind. Of course, I could for the next few days because I had to get everything closed up in Europe and get home. And when I got home, though, the next couple weeks were really filled with nightmares. I have a lot of bad dreams. I always have since I was a little kid. And I had a lot of dreams with Jeff Dahmer. They weren't necessarily evil. He wasn't killing people, but he was in my dreams. He'd be sitting there in an empty room on the couch, and I'd walk in, and he'd say, "Hey, Mike." And I'd say, "Hey, Jeff." And that'd be the dream. And I'd wake up. And that'd be enough of a nightmare to just really make you uncomfortable. But he was on my mind for weeks, months after the news broke. And you try to visualize him physically doing these things as somebody that you can hear his voice, you can see his eyes, you knew him, and here he's done these horrendous things that have no answer for anything he's done, and you can't rationalize it. There's no way to rationalize it. You don't even try. But how do you feel? Geez, you're like, wow, that's like, oh, I guess life will be different now, knowing a serial killer like Jeffrey Dahmer, and you can either put it aside and pack it away out of your thoughts, or you can try to learn a little more about the problems that people have in society that become serial killers, and try to learn some more about these unfortunate people and their victims, and that's something I tried to do. I didn't know much about serial killers, really. I mean, we all knew, Manson and others, but nothing about their backgrounds or anything. And I started reading more on it, and it's really dark stuff. It can really bring you down and make you feel awful, unless you laugh at some of the stuff that's just so over the top that you can't imagine anyone physically doing. Maybe it's a close walk to hell when you think about Jeff Dahmer sitting next to you in high school class. It's something that, fortunately, there's only a few of us that went through that, but we look back at it as just part of our high school experience. Sometimes people say to me, they say, "Wow, I can't believe you went to high school with Jeff Dahmer. You're like the only person I know that's done that." I always say, well, there's about 175 other people that did that too.
Yeah.
Our whole class went to high school with Jeff Dahmer. But it does leave, it's a piece of your life that's always going to be there. And you can open that drawer and look in it sometimes and shut the drawer and try to get away from it. And when you forget about it for a while, suddenly you're doing a podcast all about Jeff Dahmer and all the memories come back,
Yeah. Yeah, I just think it's like important to sort of like document these things, so it sort of doesn't get lost. And I think it's like interesting to hear these stories, and just so people kind of know what really went down with all this from a different perspective.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, obviously, as someone who does research and teaching for a living, I find it's important to document life stories and the human experience, and to try to get a better grasp on society and what's happening. And I still have ideas about writing my own book about not Jeff Dahmer specifically, but about my hometown as a geographer, a cultural geography of my hometown and the people there and growing up. And certainly Jeff Dahmer would be part of that, because he did alter our hometown forever. I mean, I always think of that dark stretch of road as pretty shadowed ground up there where the Dahmers lived. Fortunately, it's a beautiful house, beautiful setting, and the people are doing well that live there now, taking care of the place and making it a home again. Things have gone on in all kinds of places on Earth. We can't look at the past all the time, but still, I think it should be documented. It should be talked about. The more you sweep things under the rug, the more prone they are to come back and rise up again.
Yeah, I would love for you to write a book about Akron and Bath, Ohio. I think that'd be really interesting, and Jeff just being a small part of that. But I just think I'm like a history buff. Like, I love all this kind of stuff, so I think that'd be really interesting.
Yeah, they're going to tear down Revere High School this next year. The high school we all went to, it's going to be torn down, and there's going to be a new school built there. And so this would be another part of remembering that school, is to write about those days. And that's sort of a lost period of time. People write about the 80s, and there's a lot of movies about the 1980s, and there's a lot of movies about the 1960s, and I'm really sick of the 60s. And, and... But the late 70s, everyone says, oh, disco, Saturday Night Fever. I'm like, that was not part of our lives whatsoever. I mean, it was the punk rock thing was sort of the new thing coming in.
Yeah.
I mean, I listened to like Neil Young and the Ramones and the Police and the Cars, and that was like the music I listened to. And it's an era of time that sort of missed out on. I mean, I never felt much of the baby boom generation in my age, even though statistically we are. Yeah. We had very little to do with Vietnam or hippies or the 60s. That wasn't our scene at all. And that's one thing I really like about Durf's book, that it captures that time period, the late 70s, the end of the 70s. So, yeah. I want to do something too.
Yeah, I guess sort of as we wind down here, I have a couple more short things I want to talk to you about. I don't know if you're aware of this either, but they might have just shot it, or they might be shooting it right now, I'm not sure. But they're actually making a movie about Ted Bundy, and he's being played by Zac Efron, who was another Disney Channel star. So I guess in my opinion, it's sort of piggybacking off of Dahmer, or maybe it's just like a freak coincidence. But I don't know. What do you kind of think about the Disney serial killer craze that's going on right now?
I'd really love to have be part of the conversation between Zach and all the other Disney serial killer actors here, because it's so funny that that's happening. Ted Bundy has some connections to Ohio too, as far as killing, but I don't know what's going on with these Disney guys having to play serial killers. I mean, it's just maybe getting out of the Disney skin and being this taking it to the other side as dark as you can. Going to playing serial killers. Jeez, that's so funny.
Yeah.
I didn't know that. I heard there was a movie about Ted Bundy coming out. I didn't know who was going to play him, though.
Oh, yeah. That's another Disney star. So he's a bit older, but he was a Disney star like 15 years ago or something.
Yeah, yeah. Well, Bundy was older when he did these. I'm sure the movie will take place like when Bundy's around 30 years old. So that's my guess. That'll work. 25, 30.
Yeah. And the one last thing I want you to talk about here, you were actually a character in a fictionalized version of your friendship with Durf in the book Trashed. What can you tell me about that? Obviously, the book is a work of fiction, but it takes inspiration from your actual time working for the trash department. So, what can you tell me about that?
Well, first of all, I'd like to know who told you it's a work of fiction. Most of the things that happen in Trash are reality.
Well, I don't necessarily mean fiction, but they sort of bump it up to like modern day is like what I mean.
Oh, they do. They do. The book does not. Now, I heard there is a film coming out. They're working on a movie on Trash, and I heard that will be contemporary, set in like modern day. The book is set more when we were on the trash truck, which was 79 and 80. And we worked for the local township government, and there was one day a week when you had to do trash Tuesdays. And it was the craziest summer job you can imagine for college students, because it was just life in hell working on a garbage truck with John Backdorf. I mean, think about it. And we had to make the most of it. I did it longer than him. I did it for 2 years. He did it for 1 year. But you have to make the most of it, and you have to laugh at it. And you're dealing with small town people and all the craziness that goes on. And we were always great storytellers with each other. And we made up stories about all the local people that weren't true. And we imagined what they were doing. And we had a lot of fun with the local guys who were the full-time guys working for the township service department, because they were all from our high school. They were a few years older than us. And it was a great job because you're out in the summer all day riding around in the fresh air, picking up dog feces and other stuff. So it was just your perfect summer job. But I would like to see what they're going to do with that as far as a film. But that's a great book. That book is a little more educational in some ways because of all the stuff about trash in there and things like that. But I'm glad that was done. That was a great experience, a great summer experience, and it was Durf and me working on the truck and just dealing with all the small town craziness that went on. And it was a time you look back on and say that's what we did in those years. And I have to give Durf credit for some of this stuff because he, in a way, has immortalized our high school days in both of these books, in Trashed and in My Friend Dahmer. And I don't know what else is yet to come. I keep telling him to do one about us toilet papering houses, but he doesn't want to do that, I don't think. So we'll see. We'll see what comes up. But I may have to do my own sometime about the days back home, because those are great times and funny stuff we did, from the garbage truck to Jeff Dahmer to toilet paper to all kinds of things before we all vanished and went off to college and went our own ways.
Yeah. I guess sort of as we close out here, is there anything else you think the viewers should know about Jeff Dahmer, or anything else you want to share about the film or your life in high school or anything?
Oh, I don't know. I would say our high school days were a great time for most of us, and I don't think there was that much bullying that went on in our high school, and I don't think Dahmer was picked on that much as portrayed in the movie or the book. I just find those things very hard to believe myself. But I'm really, really happy with where we went to high school, when we went to high school, and our teachers in our school. And I don't know if anyone could have recognized that there was a problem with this kid, Jeff Dahmer, and that he needed some therapy and some treatment when we were 16 years old. There were a lot of kids in high school, a lot stranger, a lot crazier, a lot weirder than him, and a lot more demented. And Jeff Dahmer, teachers liked him. He was a quiet, studious kid when he wanted to be. And I think that's why he got away with murder for so long, because nobody suspected him, and he was smart enough to cover it all up, and smart enough to be able to talk to people again and again that they believed him and trusted him, that he wasn't doing anything wrong. So, those are some of the things about high school days, too, that I say, like, it wasn't such a dark, evil time at all. And sometimes when you think about someone like Jeff Dahmer being part of your high school class, it draws, the curtains a little darker around your memories. But I still have very positive memories of those times in high school, and I thoroughly enjoyed the book by Durf, and I really, really liked what Mark Myers and everybody else with his team did with the movie, and Ross Lynch and Harry Holzer and all these guys did a great job playing people that they didn't know, people they never met, and being part of a time in my life when the future was wide open and we didn't know what direction anything was going to go and where any of us were going to end up. I think that was exciting to see on the screen, and I like that. Sure, there's things in the movie that didn't happen. That's okay. It makes it a better movie. Sure, I would have liked to have been the guy who drove Dahmer home in the last scene. But anyways, I'm not griping about it. I hope people watch the movie. I hope people learn something from it, and don't take it too deep. Take it for what it is, a little bit about this one kid had some home problems, and his home problems didn't make him a serial killer. Lots of kids come from divorced parents. Lots of kids have parents who argue and fight or have drinking issues in high school. That doesn't make anyone a serial killer. There's something else that went on in Jeff Dahmer's mind that I don't have an answer to. I don't have a solution to. And I don't think anyone does. He doesn't fit a pattern. He doesn't fit into a mold of others. He was just who he was, and it's unfortunate for his victims and all of that. But I think the more we learn from watching a movie, from reading a book, from learning about these people, maybe it's going to make us aware a little more about how fragile life is and how fragile the human existence is and how it can all shatter very quickly. And I don't know if there's a Jekyll and Hyde in all of us. Some people say there is. But I think in Dahmer's case, it took over his life, the bad side. Because he wasn't a bad kid. He wasn't a bad kid when we knew him. So that's too bad. Lives are destroyed by people like this. But it goes on. And it's like I said, it's part of your life then as well. So anything else I can add?
I don't think so. You did awesome. I really loved talking to you today, and thank you so much for agreeing to do this with me.
Oh, it's been a pleasure. Anytime you want to do some more like this, buddy, just give me a call, be in touch, and maybe we can work on a movie together. I'm a big fan of the movies. I was in A Christmas Story, the one filmed in Cleveland. Did you know that?
Oh yeah, I did know that. I actually forgot to ask you about that. How was Darren McGavin? I'm actually a huge fan of Kolchak the Night Stalker. So how was Darren McGavin?
You have asked me the perfect question right now. Because, when that was filmed, I knew Darren McGavin only from The Night Stalker. And that was one of my favorite shows as a kid. I mean, that was on live when I was like 12 years old, The Night Stalker, or 10 years old, or 13. And I love stuff about that, about vampires and werewolves and all. It inspired the X-Files, that series, I hope you know.
Yeah.
And so I'm standing there in the snow in Cleveland as an extra on that movie set because I needed a job being home from Ohio University. And it was the night they filmed the leg lamp scene, which they shot over 30 times of him coming out of the house and pointing at the house. There's the leg lamp. There's a Major Ward. And I walk up behind him, and I'm standing behind him. So one time he's just standing there by himself in the snow, waiting and waiting and waiting. And I said, I'm going to go talk to this guy. I want to meet. Inspector Kolchak. And I go up to him and I say, hey, Mr. McGavin, how are you doing tonight? It's really cold out here. It's snowing. He goes, oh, yeah, it's pretty chilly here. It's pretty cold. I said, and the next thing I said was, I always loved Inspector Kolchak, the Night Stalker. That was my favorite show. That was so cool, that show. And he said to me, he goes, yeah, we had a lot of fun making that too. That was a lot of fun. And that was about all he said about the Night Stalker, but that's what I talked to him about. And he's a very friendly man, very gregarious, very nice. And I can't say that about other people on that set who were... some union people that yelled and screamed at us not to touch things and get out of the way. And, we had a tough time with some of them, us extras who didn't know what we were doing. But Darren McGavin was just a gem. And if you watch the series, The X-Files, which, like I said, was inspired by Kolchak the Night Stalker, he's in there as a guest star in a couple episodes, and he plays an ex-FBI agent who's extremely paranoid, and he won't open his door to Sculder. I'm getting
Scully.
the names mixed up. Scully and Mulder. Yes, thank you. I do that. He only opens the door a crack, and you can see it's Darren McGavin, and he's like, who are you? Go away. Don't bother me. Don't ask any questions. Goodbye. He slams the door. And there's like 3 episodes where they go to ask him about old cases, and it's great to see that because it's all from the Kolchak experience. So when people ask me about movies, I say, well, you can see me in My Friend Dahmer. I'm in the prom scene, and you can see me in A Christmas Story. I'm in the leg lamp scene. And I think those 2 movies sort of are the 2 outside pillars of my reality sometimes, Christmas and happiness, and this great Christmas movie that so many people love and have it as their favorite Christmas movie of all time. And then the movie about Jeff Dahmer. I mean, what a range. Maybe I want to do something in the middle sometime, but I've always loved movies. That's a big part of my life.
Yeah. Very cool. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show. As I said, anytime you ever want to come on, just let me know. I hope to see you again sometime soon and work with you on something. But this was great. Just thank you for doing this. This was a really awesome interview.
It's been fun. It's always a great time. And I hope I shared some thoughts with people about my days long ago with Jeff Dahmer in high school. So take care.
That is it for this time, guys. I want to thank my friend Mike for being on the show today. If you haven't already, please make sure you like this video, share it with a friend, and subscribe to my channel. It is all greatly appreciated. And what would you like to see from me next? Let me know down in the comments below, and I will see you next time on another edition of the House of Horror.